"Is it so?" cried Little John in a rage. "No, by my faith, thou saucy rogue, thy tongue hath led thee into a pit thou wilt have a sorry time getting out of it. For I will give thee such a drubbing as ne'er hast thou had in thy whole life before. Take thy staff in thy hand, fellow, for I will not smite an unarmed man." "Marry, come up with a Marianne," cried the tanner, for he, too, had talked himself into a fume. "By big words ne'er killed so much as a mouse. Who art thou that talkest so freely of cracking the heads of Arthur a Bland? If I do not ten thee hide the day as ne'er I tended a calf hide in all my life before, split my staff into skivers for lamb flesh, and call me no more brave man. Now look to thyself, fellow." "Stay," said Little John. "Let us first measure our cudgels. I do not reckon my staff longer than thine, and I would not take advantage of free by even so much as an inch." "Nay, I pass not for length," answered the tanner. "My staff is long enough to knock down a calf, so look to thyself, fellow, say I." So without more ado, each gripping a staff in the middle, and with fell and angry looks they came slowly together. Now news had been brought to Robin Hood that how Little John, instead of doing his biddings, had passed off by duty for pleasure, and so had stopped overnight with merry companion at the Blue Boar Inn instead of going straight to Ancaster. So being vexed to his heart by this, he set forth at dawn of the day to seek Little John at the Blue Boar, or at least to meet the yeoman on the way, and ease his heart of what he thought of the matter. As thus he strode along in anger, putting together the words he would use to chide Little John, he heard, of a sudden, loud and angry voices of men in range, passing fell words back and forth from one end to the other. At this Robin Hood stopped and listened. "Surely," quoth he to himself, "that is Little John's voice, and he is talking himself in anger also. Methinks think the other is stronger to my ears. Now heaven forfend that my good trusty Little John should have fallen into the hands of the king's rangers. I must see to this matter, and that quickly." Thus spoke Robin Hood to himself, all his anger passing away like a breath from the window pane, at the thought that perhaps his trusty right-hand man was in some danger of his life. So cautiously he made his way through the thickness whence the voices came, and pushing aside the leaves, peeping into the little open space where the two men, staff in hand, were coming together slowly. "Ha!" quoth Robin to himself, "here is merry sports afoot. Now I would give thee golden angels from my own pocket, if yon stout fellow would give Little John a right sound drubbing. It would please me to see him well tumbled for having failed in my bidding. I fear me, though, there is but poor chance of my seeing such a pleasant sight." So saying, he stretched himself a length upon the ground, that he might not only see the sport the better, but that he might enjoy the merry sight at his ease. As you may have seen two dogs that think to fight, walking slowly around and around each other, neither cur wishing to begin the combat, so those two stout yeomen moved slowly around, each watching for a chance to take the other unaware, so get in the first blow. At last Little John struck like a flash and rap. The tanner met the blow and turned it aside, and then smote back at Little John, who also turned the blow, and so this mighty battle began. then up and then down and back and forth, and they trod, the blows falling so thick and fast that at distance one would have thought that half a score of men were fighting. Thus they fought for 9.5 hours, until the ground was all ploughed up with the dings of their heels, and their breathing grew laboured like the ox in the furrow. But Little John suffered the most, for he had become unused to such stiff labour, and his joints were not as supple as they had been before he went to the drill with the sheriff. All this time Robin Hood lay beneath the bush, rejoicing at such a comely bout of quarterstaff. By my faith, quoth he to himself, never have I thought to see Little John so evenly matched in all my life. Belike though he would have overcome yon fellow before this, had he been in his former trim. At least Little John saw his chance, and throwing all the strength he felt going from him into one blow that might have fallen an ox, he struck at the tanner with might and main. And now did the tanner cowhide cap stand him in good stead, and but for it he might never have held his staff in his hand again. As it was, the blow he caught beside the head was so shrewd that it sent him staggering across the little glade, so that if Little John had had the strength to follow up his advantage, it would have been ill for stout Arthur. But he regained himself quickly, and at arm's length struck back a blow at Little John, and this time his stroke reached his mark, and down went Little John a full length, his cudgel flying from him and his hand, and he fell. Then raising his staff, stout Arthur dealt him another blow upon the ribs. "Hold!" roared Little John. "Wouldst thou strike a man when he is down?" "Aye, marry, would I," quoth the tanner. "Give him another thwack with his staff." "Stop!" roared Little John. "Help! Hold, I say! I yield me, I say, good fellow." "Hast thou had enough?" asked the tanner, grimly holding his staff aloft. "Aye, marry, and more than enough." "And thou dost own that I am better man of the two of us?" "Aye, marry, and more." "Yea, truly, and a murrings hasty," said Little John, the first aloud and the last to his beard. "Then thou mayest go thy way, and thank thou thy patron saint that I am a merciful man," said the tanner. "A plague of such mercy as thine," said Little John, sitting up and feeling his ribs where the tanner had clutched him. "I make my vow, my ribs feel as though even one of them were broken in twine. I tell thee, good fellow, I didn't think there was never a man in all Nottinghamshire could do me what thou hast done this day." "And so thoughtest I also," cried Robin Hood, bursting out of the thicket and shouting with laughter till the tears ran down his cheeks. "Oh, man," said he, as well as he could for his myth, "didst go over like a bottle knocked from a wall. I did see the whole merry bound, and never did I think to see thee yield thyself so hand and foot to any man in all merry England. I was seeing thee, to chide thee for leaving my bidding undone, but thou hast been paid all I owe thee, for measure, pleasure, down and overflowing, by this good fellow." Mary did reach out his arm full length, while Thou stood gaping at him, and with a pretty rap tumbled thee over as never have I seen one tumble before. So spoke bold Robin, and all the time Little John sat up on the ground, looking as though he had sauerkraut in his mouth. "What may be thy name, good fellow?" said Robin, next turning to the tanner. "Men do call me Arthur a Bland," spoke up the tanner boldly. "Now, what may be thy name?" "Ha, Arthur a Blade?" quoth Robin. "I have heard thy name before, good fellow. Thou didst break the crown of a friend of mine at the fair at Ely last October. The folk there calls him Jack o' Nottingham. We call him Will Scarletlock. This poor fellow, whom thou hast so beloaded, is counted the best hand at the quarterstaff in all merry England. His name is Little John, and mine Robin Hood. How! cried the tanner. Art thou indeed the great Robin Hood? And this is the famous Little John? Marry, had I known who thou art, I would never have been so bold as to lift my hand against thee. Let me help thee to thy feet, good master Little John, and let me brush the dust from off thy coat. Nay, quoth Little John, tersely, at the same time rising carefully, as though his bones had been made of glass. I can help myself, good fellow, without thine aid. And let me tell thee, had it not been for the vile cowskin cap of thine, it would have been ill for thee this day. At this Robin laughed again, and turning to the tanner, he said, Wilt thou join my band, bold, good Arthur? For I make my vow thou art one of the stoutest men that my ears beheld. Will I join thy band? Cried the tanner jollyful. Ay, marry will I. Hey for a merry life, cried he, leaping aloft and snapping his fingers, and hey for the merry life I love. Away with tank bank and filthy vats and foul cow hides. I will follow thee to the ends of the earth, good master, and not a herd of dun deer in all the forest but shall know the sound of a twang of my bowstring. As for thee, Little John, said Robin, turning to him and laughing, thou wilt start once more for Ancaster, and we will go party with thee. For I will not have thee turn again to either right hand nor the left, till thou hast fairly gotten away from Sherwood. There are other inns that thou knowest yet, hereabouts. Thereupon, leaving the Pickless, they took once more the highway and departed upon their businesses.